Thank you everyone for joining us. I'll ask you to put your microphones on mute if you are not speaking, just so we don't hear any background noise. And I think it's time to get started. So welcome to tonight's webinar, What is Self-Direction? Presented by the RIPIN Self-Directed Support Program team. I am Sarah Gloa. I am the Communications and Community Engagement Manager here at RIPIN. And I'm going to go over a few housekeeping items before I turn it over to the program team. So we will be recording this presentation for training and sharing purposes. You'll have access to the shared recording after the webinar. We'll send out an email with follow-up details. Please feel free to share this with anyone that you think the content is relevant for. We have enabled closed captions if you wish to participate in that. There's a button at the bottom that allows you to show captions. We also have two ASL interpreters with us tonight, Russ and Rain. And they'll be spotlit throughout the presentation and also part of the recording. We ask if you have a question, please type it in the chat or in the Q&A box, and our presenters will answer as many as they can. There will be a couple of breaks throughout the webinar to check on questions and address them. So with that said, I'd like to turn it over to Sharon Koshin, who is the Program Manager of the Self-Directed Support Program at RIPIN.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. For those of you who don't know what RIPIN is about, we are an independent 501c3 nonprofit organization, and we've been helping Rhode Islanders for almost over 30 years. 65% of our staff is staffed by peer professionals, and that means that we are individuals who have loved ones or parents, caregivers, family members of people with all sorts of health concerns or disabilities, and we have navigated the systems that people are trying to access, such as healthcare, education, healthy aging, and other services and complex systems. With me tonight is Susan Donovan, who is our Self-Directed Program Director, and she is going to go over these pieces. Sue?
Thank you, Sharon. Yes, so tonight we're here to talk about self-directed services, and what are they? Self-directed support is a service delivery model for adults with intellectual and/or developmental disabilities. And it allows the individuals to, with the help of their perhaps family members, guardians, or trusted allies, to employ their own staff and choose the activities and additional services that they need to create that meaningful life that they want to live through the funding that's provided by them that they're eligible for through the Medicaid home and community-based long-term dollars, which is through the state agency that we refer to as BHDDH, otherwise known as Behavioral Healthcare, Developmental Disabilities, and Hospitals. And specifically, this program and the folks that we're supporting in this work are specifically receiving funding through and eligibility through the Division of Developmental Disabilities.
Great, thank you, Sue. So why would somebody want to consider self-direction?
So actually, Sharon, self-direction, it gives individuals more choice and control over the supports that they receive by allowing people to set up their own staffing schedules. Individuals, consumers get to choose how they want to spend their time and set up their activities. And the activities are designed specifically for and around that person, for their individual goals and their individual interests. The funds are used more directly and efficiently, so the dollars go further. There's less overhead. When a consumer is at the helm, then there's less overhead than if you were an agency where you have brick and mortar, right? You have to keep the lights on and the electricity on. But self-directing, the consumer has more dollars to stretch for more hours available for that support, that one-to-one support. And consumers are even able to use self-directed services and combine self-directed with agency programs.
Great. So you mentioned private provider agencies and then self-direction. Can you tell us what the difference would be?
Sure. So when you self-direct services, you are considered the employer. You hire and train the staff. You set the wages and the schedule of your workers. It's required more of your own planning. So it's certainly, the consumer is certainly using more of their own personal time to implement this. And the services and activities are based specifically for the individual. When you're working with a provider agency and you're using that model, more of your allocated budget goes towards program administration and costs, such as management and transportation. There typically would be fewer hours of direct support, and the schedules are more set and based on hours of operation, typically. Activities are predetermined. Training is more generalized and not as unique to the individual consumer.
So I'm going to pause there for a second. Laura, do we have any questions yet in the chat?
No, not yet.
So Sue, I do have a question myself. Are you able to use self-direction and agency funds at the same time?
Absolutely. So depending on what your budget is, you can actually take your budget and you can carve out some funding to purchase services through a provider agency. There may be a program that an agency provides that you want to participate in, and you can write that into your plan. So you can do that, and you can use some of your funding to do the self-directed. So you can mix, you can do both.
Thanks. So I understand that it's not families that take a check when it's time for the funding to come through, right? We use what's called a fiscal intermediary. Can you tell us a little bit about what a fiscal intermediary is and what they do?
I sure can. It's a mouthful. So a fiscal intermediary is an agency that manages the money that you're allocated, right? So you've been found eligible for these services, and the state can't just give you a check and go at it. The funding goes to an FI, and they handle payroll, hiring forms, background checks, tax forms, workers' compensation, maintaining employment records. Currently, we have 6 agencies in Rhode Island that provide this type of service, in addition to providing direct services to consumers that they're working with as well. Those 6 services are the Fogarty Center, Trudeau, Seven Hills, ProAbility, Refocus, and Perspectives. So all 6 agencies, they're doing programming as an agency, but they also offer a program that you can do self-direction through.
Okay, so I understand some responsibilities are on families and some are on the FI. Tell us a little bit about what the fiscal intermediary will not be doing for families.
Absolutely. And so it's important that our consumers understand what the FIs cannot do, right? They cannot find, interview, or otherwise select your staff. They don't determine or identify the particular supports that are needed for you. They don't create an individualized plan of support, an ISP, but we'll talk about a little bit later on where you can get help for that. They don't train staff, or I should say they're not training staff that are being utilized in the self-directed model. They don't determine the pay rate and benefits for a staff person. However, there are recommended pay rates, and that can be found on the BHDDH website. There is a sheet that kind of gives you some guidance on what you should be, what a good goal, what you should be targeting for a good pay rate, depending on your budget. They don't create schedules, and they don't create expectations for your staff, and they don't supervise staff. They don't submit employee timesheets or other invoices. It would be up to the consumer and or the consumer's network of support, right? Their trusted allies, to, make sure that timesheets are submitted on time. Any invoices that that the network or the family or the consumer, has to put in for reimbursement on something that's been approved in their plan, that has to be done by the consumer and or their trusted network of support.
So where do families turn when they have questions, and how are they going to get started? Who's out there to help us get started?
Sure. So that's a great question. So there are support brokers, and actually RIPIN, we are providing a webinar on October 24th, where we're going to be interviewing 3 of the support brokers that we have in Rhode Island right now. And support brokers, folks will be able to hire them out of their budget money to help them do some of that more in-depth planning and connecting and identifying employment resources, or identifying where they can go for employment training or different types of supports, or creating, helping the consumer and the families create a social calendar, right? What am I going to do 7 days a week? So the service brokerages they do provide the service for a fee. There is a fee attached to it, and BHGDH has set standards as far as the rate of how much the fees the service brokerages will be charging, and how much time can be set aside from your budget to hire service brokerage. You'll also receive guidance from plan writers, right? There are independent plan writers that we're currently using in our current system of care, and they are very knowledgeable about the resources that are available. And they work with consumers and their families around creating the individual support plan and identifying what services and supports that you'll need in order to meet your goals during the course of the year. Often, and then again, we also have our personal networks, right? And network, that's our middle name here at RIPIN. Your personal networks are those trusted allies, such as family members, friends, maybe guardians or mentors. They can help support you as well.
Okay, so before we bring on our guests, I'm going to ask Laura again. Do we have any questions, Laura, in the chat?
Yes, we do. We have 3 of them.
Okay.
Actually, one is a comment. The first question is, parents and guardians have to train staff. We are not BCBAs, not qualified to train staff to work with our child. What do we do?
So that's a great question. Thank you. I think it'll be really helpful to tap into support brokers to help identify training opportunities for staff, as well as the Rhode Island Self-Direct Coalition. They are a small agency that has recently started up that will be focusing on training for direct support professionals. And actually, that's coming up on a slide a little further in our presentation. So there will be some resources that have been developed by the state. I know some of us are on different work groups, the statewide workforce initiative. And although that was originally intended to help build up the workforce capacity, especially around just direct support professionals, I'm looking at it and thinking this might be a great resource for us that self-direct. And I know they'll have resources, trainings that I know that we as a family that will be tapping into as well. So keep your eyes peeled for more to come on that, because there will be more resources unfolding over the next few months.
Got it.
The second question is, my child is 19. What is the first step? Is it a SIS evaluation?
So that's a great question. Thank you for your question. And let's wait on that question, because right after our guests come, the very next slide talks about that. So we'll be answering that shortly.
There's a comment that says it sounds like you are basically running your own business.
Absolutely. I was looking through the paperwork and full disclosure, my daughter has been self-directing for about 6 years now, 7 years. And I was looking at some old paperwork from 6 years ago, and it referred to her as a home-based business. And it was really hard for me to wrap my head around the idea that, wait a minute, like my child is the employer, it is the business. And but yes, absolutely, it is very much the consumer that has been found eligible for these funds is their own entity. Yeah, I would definitely agree with that.
And there's one more question so far. It says, my son will be 21 in February. We haven't had a SIS eval yet, and I think it will be in December. Am I stuck as far as starting to reach out since I don't yet have the funding?
So yeah, you're definitely going to need more information before you make decisions around certain things. But I think attending webinars and trainings like this is a really, really good first step, because this is where you're going to learn a lot of information, so that when it does come time for that, you're going to feel a lot more comfortable and confident in making choices.
Great. Okay, Laura, thank you. I'm going to bring now Deborah Masland, who is a self-directed consumer, a parent of a self-directed consumer, and her daughter, Olivia. Hi, Deborah. Thanks for joining us. And Olivia, thank you for joining us. So could you tell us your name and how long you've been self-directing?
So unlike her mother, Olivia is a little bit shy and takes a while to find her words. And I know I've been told that I have about 10 minutes. So Olivia, is it okay if I do most of the talking tonight? As per usual, poor thing. Yes. Okay. So Olivia and I like to say, it's so funny that I was asked, like, why did you choose self-direction? And I like to say, I think self-direction chose us, because Olivia had the pleasure of turning 21 about 3 years ago, right in the middle of COVID. It was also she was in the first cohort of young adults who could stay in high school in special education until she was 22. The only problem is that, as many of you on this call know, at 21, the child services end. So I was like, oh, what do I do? And I remember thinking, gosh, I wish I could still keep my past worker that has been with us for the last year since Olivia was 11 and is a wonderful help after school. And really supported Olivia's, especially getting out in the community and doing social things. And somebody said, I think you can do partial, get partial funding, because she'll be eligible for funding. We had her SIS done early enough, like by the time she was 18, she had the SIS done and all that kind of stuff. And we had her tier level, so we were ready to get started. We got connected with a fiscal intermediary and a plan writer, and we put a plan in place. So the first year that we self-directed, we only had a few hours after school in our self-directed program, and that's all we did. And for the person who was asking about us running our own business, it really isn't, you're not in it alone. Your fiscal intermediary is extremely helpful. They take care of like the, withholding taxes, getting the checks mailed out, or automatic deposit or whatever it is for your direct service worker. So you don't have to worry about that. And then Olivia turned 22. We decided to continue with self-directed because, of course, we were right in the middle of COVID, and the day programs there were very few day programs, and that didn't look like a great idea to have Olivia out there. So we started to do the self-direction, and we couldn't be happier. We were told at that time that Olivia's stepdad, who was retired and at home during the day, could be one of her workers. And we were like, well, that sounds like a great idea because Olivia is very comfortable with him. And he's also very good at setting goals and things like that. So we worked with our plan writer. We worked with things that Olivia had already been working on while she was at school. And we were starting to work toward how do we get her ready to have a job, to be a productive member of our family. And to have a social life. And that was the big drawback about self-directed, I think, was that she went from having friends in school to being home with two, shall we say, more mature people in her home, which wasn't always the best thing for her. So we had to think about what was in our community and try to get connected with things that are going on in the community, library groups, some social groups. We did some online things with her. There are a lot of things that are provided out there. And what we found, it was sometimes hard to find those things. But once we did, we were able to connect her with a social group that she's still with, and she's made some good friends there. We connected with some job prep opportunities that came through our fiscal intermediary and our plan writer. They connected us with some things. She had a couple internships. Those fell through a couple times. Meanwhile, we were working with her at home, getting her ready to do some things that she was good at. And one of the things we found out, Olivia, that you're good at, right, is doing some cleaning around the household, doing bathrooms, vacuuming, doing windows, her own laundry, all those kinds of things. So we started working on there, and Olivia got very, very good at these things. And lo and behold, today she started her first day at a job doing some light cleaning at an office 1 day a week, which was perfect for her. So we have found that being able to do the things that are most comfortable for Olivia, she's not always comfortable in new situations or around a lot of people where she has to explain herself. We were connected with one of the programs that we were connected with helped do a video resume where, we put together pictures and there were some voiceovers, and Olivia was able to be prompted to say some things on there so that we were able to share that with potential employers. We've just done a great job. And I think Olivia has learned to appreciate her parents, but not all the time. So it's been really important for us to still have our other workers. So we have two workers. We have her stepdad and we have her worker who used to be her past worker, who still does most of the connections out in the community, going out to dinner with friends, spending time, dressing up for Halloween, going to events and things like that. So she has a very rounded life. And she's also an incredibly wonderful contributing member to our family. I joke around and say she's going to help her stepdad and me age in place because she's going to be able to take care of us when we can't do that anymore. So we're big fans of the self-directed option.
I see that. What would you like to see improve with self-direction? If you
Communication. And some of the things that I found out were just because I happened to say, gosh, I wish we could do something like this, and somebody overheard me. They answered us, so I think that what I'm very excited to be part of at RIPIN is this self-directed support program, is because it's hoping we're going to be able to start getting the same information out to everybody so that everybody has the same opportunities to participate in programs. They're out there. And then there are some that are lacking. What I found is that for some folks, and Olivia is one of them, it takes her a really long time to learn things. Once she learns them, she can be really proficient. But when she had an internship at one point during one program, they allowed for 40 hours of that internship. It wasn't enough. She needed probably triple that amount. And so when it came time for the restaurant, she was doing some bussing tables, to actually hire her outright. they were not in a position to do so because she wasn't quite ready to do things as independently as they needed her to do. So I would like to see programs to make sure that we knew that it can be more flexible. Apparently it was okay to ask for more hours. I did not know that, so I did not. So it would have been a nice opportunity. So things like that, just like what we're doing here, is sharing information on how to sign up. I think, don't be discouraged. Those people that are still waiting for your SIS, you can still move through and learn more information. But you can also tailor the program to meet your needs and your family's needs. If you need to have a program for a while, you need to have your child still in school for a while.
Are there any questions, Laura, for Deborah or for Olivia?
There's just a nice comment.
Okay.
It says, I am so happy to hear of Olivia's success. My son used to participate in a dance class many years ago with her. So glad she is thriving. Great job, Mom.
It's
Yeah,
Rhode Island,
nice.
right?
Right.
Someone,
Yeah, I love it. Yeah.
someone just saying hi. And
Okay.
no questions though.
Great.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Well, we're very happy you were here to join us today, Deborah and Olivia. Sue, do you have any other questions for Deborah before we move on?
Just Deborah and Olivia, thank you so much. Olivia, I'm so excited to hear about your job. Your mom was telling me about it, and it is Rhode Island. I do know your boss, and he is such a nice person. So I was really super excited to hear that you connected with great folks and doing something that you enjoy doing. So good luck with that, and congratulations. And Deborah, thank you so much.
All right. So we've heard some success stories. We've gotten some information about self-direction. Sue, how do we get started for
Okay,
families
so
looking?
that's the next slide.
Mhm.
And a couple of things I wanted to just follow up on what Deborah had said, and she is right. The fiscal intermediaries, the FIs, they are very helpful. In that first year that we did it, my daughter, her coordinator, we must have emailed them every week asking questions, and they were very helpful, pointing us in the right direction and helping us make connections. And also Deborah mentioned that they were able to utilize and hire their pass worker. And I just wanted to make sure I acronym busted. PASS, for those of you, many of us may be familiar with that in the children's system, personal assistance supports and services, PASS. And my daughter also, she was able to hire her PASS worker since middle school, when she was in middle school. And when she went into adult services, she was able to hire her for adult services. So we were very fortunate as well. So where do we start?
Okay, before
Okay.
we get started, I think
Yes.
there's one more comment about Olivia and Deborah. Do we
Yes.
have something else to
Yeah,
share?
so it says, I find my daughter does not react to me the way she reacts to teachers and other staff. I don't see me or my husband being able to teach her all the things that Deborah was able to teach Olivia. Great job, Mom.
Nice. And I know I sometimes not every parent would want to be their child's worker, and that doesn't work for all of us. And yeah, we really need sometimes that other person that is not related, someone that has a different relationship with our children. So I can appreciate that comment as well.
Okay, so where do we start?
Okay, so where do we start? So first, folks need to apply for DD services, right? And you start with the application, and that is on the BHDDH website. If you are, for students that are still in school, in high school, you're working with your IEP team, and you're often doing that, before graduation, before you're preparing to graduate, and, you're working on that application in conjunction with the IEP team. Once found eligible, then DD will implement the supports intensity scale, which is like an evaluation tool. And if your person is still in high school, then or even if they're not in high school, you want to identify folks that know and love your child the most, right? And make sure that they're in the room helping, helping with that process. I know as a family, it was important for my daughter to have her parents, her DSP from, that she had in children's services, along with a very close family friend and one of her brothers. And the supports intensity scale, that process itself can be very intimidating. And I see Laura put in the chat a link to our webinar. We have a webinar just focused on the CIS and how we can prepare as family and consumers, how we can prepare for that meeting and what we can expect. And that's coming up in November. So I highly recommend it. After that is completed, that helps generate a tier level or a funding level, which is determined based on the individual's needs. If person-centered planning hasn't occurred at this point, then that's something that plan writers will be encouraging and using person-centered tools to help get to the core of the information of what the consumer, what their strengths are, what their passions are, what are their skills, what are things that they want to build upon. Folks would then choose a fiscal intermediary, or decide what method of delivery, service delivery they want to choose, right? Families have the choice. They can utilize an agency-based services, or they can do self-direction, or a combination of both. So folks would then choose an agency, or choose, if they're doing self-direction, choose a fiscal intermediary, and identify a plan writer. That kind of occurs at the same time, and plan writers will be connecting you to, fiscal, your FIs will be connecting you to and giving you information about plan writers so that you can connect with a plan writer. And at that point, you'll be creating an individualized support plan, an ISP. And in the ISP, it kind of maps out the areas of your life. And there's also a budget component. And the plan writers are very knowledgeable about how to set up that budget. So they kind of provide a lot of support around that. And they, explain what goods and services can be purchased through this funding through BHDDH. Then the plan, the ISP and the budget all together, a package goes into BHDDH, it's submitted, and it's reviewed by a clinical team as well as a fiscal review. And then BHDDH will reach out to you to fill out the fiscal intermediary will be working with you to fill out an employer packet. And the state is responsible for reviewing and authorizing plans, which typically take about 6 weeks. Individuals can apply as early as 2 months before their 17th birthday, which is great. The earlier, the better. This way, you can get this done before you graduate or leave high school, and you'll have things set up and in place. However, we have many consumers that are much older that are submitting applications for services through BHDDH at a much older age. And we have folks that have just never applied and are still living at home or living with relatives well into their 30s, 40s. And as their family members, loved ones, parents, guardians are aging, that's when families are realizing, perhaps it's time to apply for services. And so that's the Reader's Digest version.
That's a lot.
is
I
a
know
lot.
that Laura did put in a couple of links, a couple to the BHDDH website, as well as our RIPIN, how to apply for DD services. There's a webinar in our transition to adulthood series on our RIPIN page that talks about the application itself. So we've put those in for you to look at. Laura, is there any questions?
Yes, there are several. The first question is DD just adult services?
So as our guest Deborah was saying, so typically, so the federal regulations show us that DD is responsible for consumers that are eligible for their services starting at age 18 and above. At RIPIN, we often work with families who have children that are at high school, and we also know that students with disabilities are entitled to a free and appropriate public education until the age of 22. So it needs to be individualized and unique for each student, each consumer, what they need and when they need it. As Deborah, our guest, was sharing, DD and ORS and the school department for Olivia, they worked together and did some blending and braiding of funding so that before Olivia graduated from high school, she was actually receiving services based on blended and braided funding. Was that helpful? Did that answer the question? Typically, DD is working with its lifelong services. Typically you're looking at supporting consumers from the age 18 until the end of life.
And there's
Okay.
still 3 more questions. How do you find a plan writer?
So plan writers, your fiscal intermediary or BHDDH will be connecting you with, they have a list of plan writers, and so they will, they'll provide you with names and contact information.
This is another question from application for DD services to plan authorization. What is the approximate timeline?
So that's a good question, and one that I can't answer. Because it varies so much based on the individual. If you're still in school, it's going to look very different than someone who is maybe in their, beyond school, beyond 22, they've already left school. It's going to look very different. And often for folks that are out of school, it's a little bit more, it can be a little tricky applying when you're not still in school, because when you're in school, you've got the IEP team, you've got the district that has all of the documentation that you need to submit to determine eligibility. So it really depends on the individual circumstances. That varies from person to person. I think, and I'm gonna just give you I'm thinking of a family that I worked with a few years back, and and this mom who was very involved. However, as mom would say, denial is a long river, and she was on it for a while. So her child did not apply before graduating from high school, but instead after leaving high school. And then it got bumpy tracking down certain evaluations and documentation that needed to be submitted. So the individual was not approved or recognized as eligible right away. It took some back and forth between BHDDH, the eligibility unit, and the consumer and the consumer's family. And really, it was a matter of getting together all the documentation that was needed. And so it wasn't as timely as you would typically expect it to be.
Laura, we're going to be answering the person-centered planning question in a
Okay.
couple of slides, so I'm going to hold off on that one. But Sue, does the SIS address person-centered planning as well? Or is the SIS about financial?
No, the SIS is more about what can you do and what do you need support doing. So the questions can be invasive. They can be very personal, and they can be I know my daughter was quite taken back in her SIS meeting because they are very personal questions. So they're really focused on what can you do, and do you need help with it, and what kind of help do you need prompting. So it's trying to identify the level of need. What's the consumer's level of need to be successful, to be most successful in the life that they want to lead.
Sounds great. So if we want to move on to the next slide, tell me what a kind of person's life look like when they're using self-direction.
So that's a great question. So everyone's needs vary so greatly, right? So self-direction lends itself towards greater consumer flexibility based on the individual's strengths, preferences, and interests. So a few examples of activities that may occur on a day-to-day basis would include life skills training and support, like helping with chores, budgeting, tutoring, community, recreational activities, volunteering, social outings, events, community events, fitness, walks, hikes, gym, swimming, staying active as we grow into adulthood, right? Employment, often help around job coaching or training, skill development, financial literacy, shadowing, maybe job shadowing. It's hard to know what you're interested in doing if you haven't had a lot of opportunities to try different types of jobs. So being able to shadow other people in different jobs can help you at least identify what you don't want to do. And sometimes that can narrow down your choices and help you identify work that you do enjoy doing. Volunteering, maybe creating a small business, or self-employed supports. It can support with transportation to doctor's appointments, dental appointments, any type of education and learning opportunities, perhaps classes, trainings, going to the library, or tapping into some services, events that are going on in our libraries. Many of our libraries today offer great programming, especially around the arts, painting, literature, self-advocacy training, right? That's an activity that we all have to practice, right? Not all of us are just born great self-advocates. Sometimes we need to learn how to self-advocate. Creative development and support, such as art programs, music classes, and more. Cooking classes are very popular, right, today.
Yeah, that self-advocacy is a big one.
Absolutely.
So what else can a plan include? These look like maybe a little more personal, or a little more tailored specifically?
Sure.
Okay.
So what else? Personal and or in-home care, special equipment, nursing and other professional services like OT or speech, job development and coaching, memberships to various supported programs like an art studio, YMCA, social groups, transportation costs, care and or support in the home, and the list goes on.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, so the next slide is about person-centered planning, and we've had quite a few questions about this topic tonight. So what can you tell us about person-centered planning process?
Sure. So people involved in the person's life and the person themselves come together, and it's a process, right? And they come together to identify the consumer's interests, strengths, preferences, health, and safety needs. There are many person-centered planning tools that have been identified, vetted, and shared within our schools, and also within our agencies. Our service provider agencies are utilizing them. The Sherlock Center's website has a page dedicated to providing person-centered planning tools, templates, guidebooks, resource materials, and the Sherlock Center also periodically offers, I think it's like twice a year now, training on person-centered planning. And it really, the process itself asks the important questions, like, what does this person want to create for their life at home and in the community? And it addresses, the process itself addresses the whole person in aspects of their life. So home, employment, education and training, relationships, recreation and hobbies, volunteerism, spirituality, transportation. It's kind of like developing a roadmap. And many of our schools are currently doing it at the high school level. If you're in a high school, you're working with a transition coordinator in your building, you'll want to talk to them if you're still in school and see, what they have available and who they have available to help with that. The Department of Ed provides support to regional transition centers around the state, and they have often gone in and worked with students still in the high school level before graduating to do some person-centered planning. And they may call it something differently. They may call it MAPS, or you may hear it referred to as path plans. There's all different curriculum that is utilized, has been developed specifically for person-centered planning. And then I know we've been working with a plan writer for a number of years now, and she embeds some of these practices in her work. She contacts us before it's time to sit down and write our plan, and she kind of gives us those prompting questions to ask, and ask ourselves, ask each other, ask our network of support, so that when we meet with her, we're identifying what her goals and her dreams really are.
Okay, great. So staffing is our next slide, and we had a lot of questions about staffing. What are the guidelines and the resources for families around staff?
Yeah, so staffing, yep, that's a real important aspect. So with self-direction, there is flexibility with how many staff you can hire. If you want to do one full-time or a couple of part-time staff, you can do that. You cannot have more than one staff hourly payment at the same time for the same service. So you can't pay two different workers at the same time, at the same period of time. You can pay different staff different wages, okay? They don't have to be making the same dollar amount. Taxes are taken out of their pay, and the FIs handle all that. Staff do not get paid for holidays if they do not work. And they do not earn additional dollars if they do work on holidays. There isn't holiday pay. There are requirements of staff that they must pass a background check and a driving record check if they're going to be driving, if that's going to be part of their job, part of their work. And if they are driving, they must have proof of insurance. Staff must be 18 years of age or older, and they must be a U.S. citizen or able to legally work in the United States. And as mentioned before, parents and legal guardians can be hired and paid as staff.
Okay, so these are some other resources. It looks like for those families that are wondering, I've kind of tapped out my network. Where else
Yeah.
could I go? So
Yeah. So care.com is a website that we often use to look for staff, identify staff that may be interested. Indeed.com, we've been utilizing that as well to put out job postings and and to look for folks that we can interview and vet for hiring to be staff. Word of mouth is always a powerful tool. Asking friends, connecting with other families that are using self-direction, checking, asking your neighbors, right? If you're involved with a faith-based organization, you may want to talk to people there and see. I find that once you start talking about something, it's like a snowball because people, tend to know other people and have folks that they can refer or at least send you in a direction of finding folks that may be interested. If you're connected to any of the colleges or universities, that's also a great resource for finding staff, especially part-time staff. And again, family members can work as DSPs, direct support professionals in the self-directed program. And, and there are there's plus and minuses to doing that, right? That doesn't work for everybody, right? But it does work for some. So you want to make sure that we're tapping into to folks that, if it works out well, then terrific that we're able to do that. But the Sherlock Center, again, they have a great site with self-directed supports, where to get started, and sharing templates for job postings and how to track time, how to develop that plan. And also, as I had mentioned earlier, the Rhode Island Self-Direct Coalition, there's their website link is on this slide. And they've got some resources related to direct support professionals.
all right. So it looks like this is coming to the end of our presentation, and it's coming up just on 7 o'clock. So we wanted to let people know that, just because we're doing the webinar today, that doesn't mean we're going away. RIPIN is here to stay, and we are available at contact us through our phone or our website. And I believe, did you want to show the RIPIN page, Sue? Are you able to do that? Or maybe Laura could type it in the chat for us. We'd appreciate your feedback for today. It looks like many of you have stayed with us the entire hour, and we really appreciate that. So if you could please participate in our survey, this will help guide what kinds of support and other topics you might be interested in that you might want to learn more about. And Sue, do you have any final thoughts before we open it up to some more questions?
I don't. I was going to stop share if that's okay.
Sure.
Okay, and Sarah or Laura, if you could just make sure that you put the link to the survey in the chat before I stop sharing.
I just want to say Deborah Maslin put in a great source of DSPs might be TAs or paraprofessionals that work with your child in school, because they get, they get to form a relationship with those people. So thank you, Deborah, for that tip. Appreciate it. Laura, what do we got for questions?
1 second. Let's see. How do I find a new social worker?
So that you would you'd want to call BHDDH and ask who your social worker is. If you don't have a social worker, or if they've retired, or you don't know who they are, you'll want to reach out to BHDDH and ask them directly. And you could either call them or you can email them.
Another question is there ever an option to move out of school at age 18 and into adult services if their needs are not being met by the school district?
So I'd refer you back to your IEP team, because what's going to be important is that the folks that know the student the best should be working together to identify what needs aren't being met, and if it's a failure of the school, then I would definitely call RIPIN, and we will refer you to our education team so that you can learn what your rights are under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, to make sure that schools are being held accountable for students, for students with disabilities before going into adult services. As part of the regulations, schools are required to make sure that our students receive transition-related activities and information before they leave school, so that they can be most successful in the adult service area.
Another question, I'm not sure if we think it was answered, but if you want to sign up for self-directed services but can't find a worker, what do you do?
So I would work with the provider. I would work closely with the fiscal intermediary, because they may be able to help identify staff that work in their other programs. That right now there's that's probably the biggest challenge. Well, that's been a reoccurring challenge for many of us right now, especially with the workforce shortages. So, and it's time consuming, I know whenever it's time, and right now I know I need to be working harder on that with my family, is finding a part-time worker, and I have to take a deep breath. It just makes me feel tired just thinking about it, but that can be a chore, and I would strongly recommend that you connect with a service broker, because that is something that they can help you with. And certainly the Rhode Island Self-Direct Coalition.
And our recording will have our slide presentation attached to it. So all those great resources that Sue shared a few slides ago would be available for that family as well.
I see that we're at time, but I just pulled up the RIPIN website. If you want, I could share my screen for a quick minute, and
Sure.
you could see. Okay, so I always like to go to the to our homepage first, right? I go to our homepage, and I'm trying to share, and here's our lovely homepage. Can you see it? Can you see it?
Yes, we can. Thank
Okay.
you.
Okay, so hop over here, how to get help, scroll down, self-direct support, and it brings you to the self-directed support webpage. It describes here what the program is. We have our list of upcoming events, the fall forecast over here, our different webinars.
And I see that a lot of those topics were questions from tonight's presentation as well. So I guess we're on track. So we're giving the people what they're looking for. So that's good.
That's making me very happy, very happy. And then some additional resources. We have a webinar recording that we did in partnership with the Sherlock Center, another webinar recording we did in August on employment supports, and then again, resources from the Sherlock Center. We've got a podcast here, Disability News, you can use. And then if you're not on our self-directed support email listserv, like you can sign up right here on our webpage, and we will be continuing to build this out more and more and more, so that you have information when you need it. And of course, you can always call us. We have a self-directed support email address, so it's self-directed support at ripin.org, and there are 4 of us Yeah, there's 4 of us monitoring that email to make sure that I had to count,
Thank you, Laura, for
yeah,
putting that in the
yeah,
chat. Thank you so
thank
much.
you.
Yeah.
To make sure that we're responding in a timely fashion.
All right, Sarah, I think we're all set. What do you think? Got any closing thoughts?
No, as we noted at the beginning, this will be recorded and we will send you a follow-up email, which will contain a PDF of the presentation itself, as well as the recording and any additional links this amazing program team thinks of to share with you. And we look forward to seeing you at the next event, which is October 24th. That's
Thank
it.
you.